The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians with their government. And let's connect you this morning with one of the newest members of the House of Delegates, Delegate Marcus Simon.
Hey,
welcome, sir.
Good morning, Woody. Good to see you.
So you're one of, I believe, 14 new freshman delegates, maybe 15 now.
Well, that's right. We had an original class of 14 of us. They came down for orientation in November, but with the special election in Roanoke on January 7th, we added a 15th member to the class in San Rasul. So there are now 15 first-time legislators down here in Richmond this session.
So you've moved up in seniority since.
That's right. I started out as number 99. We do actually, to get your seniority, it's a fairly scientific system. The clerk passes a hat around with numbers in it, and we all reach in and grab our number out. And I pulled the second lowest number, or second highest number, I guess, lowest in terms of seniority, with number 99. But it was Sam's election, Anonsley Ware's retirement in Roanoke. I've moved up one already, and we've got a special election recount going on in Accomack County for Linwood Lewis's seat. And so if that outcome holds up and Linwood leaves the House, I'll be down to 97 with just a couple weeks under my belt.
So was there a freshman orientation that you participated in?
Yeah, so we actually had a two-part orientation. End of November, just before Thanksgiving, they brought us down for 2 days. We spent 2 days in classes and tours and things with the clerk's office, the legislative information systems. They gave us our user IDs, allowed us to log into the computers, and taught us the basics of starting to create and file legislation so we could get things going there, and introduced us to some of the resources that they provide for us to do that. And then we came back again the Friday before session for the real hardcore intense training on essentially how to talk like a legislator, how to stand up, when to stand up, and when to sit down, how to address a committee chairperson, how to address the speaker on the floor, just basically trying to give us enough information not to embarrass ourselves as we got started. Of course, we had those lessons the very first Friday, and I remember my first committee morning, first thing I had to say out loud was just introduce myself, and I start to stand up. And of course, the committee chairman reminds me, Mr. Simon, it's okay. You sit down here in the committees. I'm like, oh, I knew that. But so some of these things you have to practice a little bit and a little trial and error before you start to get it right.
So what's the camaraderie like amongst the freshmen and generically the other members of the House of Delegates?
It's a really, it's a small fraternity, I guess. I mean, there's 140 legislators and only 100 members of the House of Delegates. And so it's been nice getting down here now that the election is over and we're all here, we're all elected, and we're all really experiencing the same things. So I've found it's a very, very supportive environment. A lot of veteran legislators from both parties have reached out and have been very helpful in providing advice, solicited and unsolicited, and helping me navigate my way through things. Among the freshmen, we're all in this together. As they tell us when you arrive, we're coming off of the high in November of winning our election and having everybody tell us how wonderful we are, and then we show up in Richmond with no seniority, and we're back to being on the low rung of the ladder, and we've got to start working our way back up again. So all of us being in that together, we do tend to socialize a little bit together. We have some receptions that are actually designed just for the freshmen. I've got a budget briefing this afternoon for the freshman class. So we have a lot of opportunity to spend time together, just the 15 of us. And so that helps build some rapport and some camaraderie as well. And we've exchanged experiences. For a lot of us, this is our first time being away from our families for the session. And so we commiserate over that and how and different tips for how to deal with that and how to keep our kids engaged and involved. So, it's been really nice, though. Everybody does go through the same thing. You find out when things aren't going well, you're not the first person to have that problem. When things are going great, you're probably not the first person to have that happen to you either, but it's nice to have that support network.
So is there a real sense of bipartisanship, even though the House of Delegates is controlled by a 2/3 majority by Republicans?
Well, in a lot of issues, in a lot of ways, there is some bipartisanship, and we do try and reach out and work across the aisle where we can. I will tell you that there's a big difference between being a freshman Democrat, as I am, when I exchange some of the stories with freshman Republicans. Yeah, that's just the nature of how the legislature works, and it's it's sort of the spoil system. I mean, they've won 66 seats, so they're entitled to some additional privileges that we in the minority don't get. So they tend to get better committee assignments, more subcommittee assignments. But other than that, I mean, we're all freshmen together, so we all kind of suffer through bad seat assignments. For instance, I'm on the very front row, which sounds like a great seat. And in a lot of venues, being in the front row is the place you want to be. But here in the House, being in the front row in the corner means I stare directly at the speaker's desk. I can't see around it, and I can't see over it. So it's a little disconcerting on the floor to not be able to see who's talking. On the other hand, one of the first things I got to do was see the State of the Commonwealth address. And so I'm right next to the governor and got to shake his hand as he came down off the dais. So I look, in all these things, I look for the positive, and look for the nice side. The nice side is that I'm here at all, which I'm pretty excited about, and look for the pluses in being in the front row and things like that.
Tell us about your committee assignments.
So I'm assigned to Science and Technology and Militia and Police. So Science and Technology is an interesting committee to be on. It doesn't have the heaviest workload of all the committees. So for somebody who wants to be involved in every piece of legislation, it's not the best place to be. But what we do has a lot of relevance to my district. I'm from Fairfax County, where we have a lot of high-tech companies and high-tech industries. And so that's an important area for us and for my constituents. And so I have an opportunity to work on issues that I know they care about. Militia and Police is an interesting place to be a Democrat in the House because we deal with all the gun violence prevention, what some call gun control issues. And we generally are outvoted significantly on that committee. So I think sometimes you get there as a freshman Democrat to learn your place a little bit here in the House of Delegates. But there's also some substantive things that happen there too. As a veteran of local government, it's interesting to work on police personnel issues, training issues for police forces, sheriff's offices, people that take care of our prisons and local jails. A lot of those regulations, a lot of those laws that govern how they do business comes through that committee as well. So there's some substantive things that I have an opportunity to work on, and so I enjoy that as well.
Now I understand that the subcommittee work is critical to the extent of moving legislation, and I know you have meetings early in the morning in terms of a subcommittee. Give us an idea of what your typical workday is like to this point.
Oh, sure. Today is actually a great example. It's probably the easiest one because it's freshest in my mind. So this morning I get up at 6:30 to go to the gym for a few minutes because every night we have a lot of receptions. There's a lot of food. So I had to work off my reception food from last night so I can still fit in my suit by the end of the session. At 7:30, I had a subcommittee hearing on a city charter amendment. So the City of Falls Church has given me a charter amendment to adjust the dates that they elect their mayor and vice mayor. So I had to present that to subcommittee at 7:30. I'm down here at about 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't know when this will air, but I'm down here at 8 o'clock in the morning to do a taping. I've got a breakfast reception upstairs at between 9 and 10. I've got constituent meetings at 10 and 11. 11:15, we go to caucus. So each party caucus meets prior to the session to work on our strategy and make sure we're all on the same page for the bills that will be coming up on the floor. The floor sessions start right at noon. So you need to be in your seat at 12 o'clock because they're starting whether you're there or not. And the session will last, as we're starting to get into the deeper part of the calendar, anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours. As we get closer to crossover, those sessions can run to be 4- and 5-hour sessions. And then 30 minutes after session ends, the committee dockets start up again, generally the full committees. So the subcommittees that met in the morning, those full committees will usually meet 30 minutes after adjournment. If you have legislation that you need to get before one of those committees, you'll be there. Then at 4:30 this afternoon, I've got another subcommittee. I've got to present a bill on election reform. I've got an election process reform bill, which I'll be presenting to the subcommittee. 5 o'clock, I have the first of 3 receptions. So I've got a reception at 5, another one that starts at 5:30, and another one that starts at 6. And so I will try and make my way around Richmond here in the snow and get from place to place to place. And then I come back to the office usually about 8:30 or so and start working on my bills for the next day. because that's about the only time I have to actually sit down and read these things thoroughly and carefully and begin to prepare my written remarks for the subcommittee chairs and so forth.
You mentioned Fairfax. Tell us a little bit about the area you represent, who the major employers are, the constituent mix you have.
Sure, Woody. The 53rd district is it's Falls Church City, is sort of the core of the district, and then about a bunch of Fairfax County precincts. Anything in Fairfax County that touches the city of Falls Church is part of my district as well, and it runs out to Merrifield and the new Mosaic Center in Merrifield. It includes Inova Fairfax Hospital, which is one of the biggest hospitals in the state. Certainly one of the biggest hospital systems, and Inova Fairfax is the flagship, and that's in my district. I've got the MVAR, which is the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors headquarters in the 53rd. We've got ExxonMobil as one of our major employers, although they're getting ready to leave in the 53rd. We've also got the small city of Falls Church itself, which has got about 2,000 residents. So we've got in a relatively compact space, a fairly varied district with some small residential, some very suburban residential, sort of an old town Falls Church feel, and then the very modern Merrifield and Dunloring metro area. My constituents are some of the wealthiest. Falls Church City has the highest, I think, average median income in the state. So we're fairly well-to-do, but also very progressive district. I've knocked on 14,000 doors in my district as part of my campaign. 14,000? 14,000. Well, we started out with the goal of 10, and we kept going when we hit that. Because being a first-time elected official, I felt I need to I know what I think is important, but I needed to talk to folks and make sure I understood what they wanted. Having grown up in the area, I felt that I was fairly well in line with that. But they care about issues concerning the environment, being able to use and purchase clean energy. Women's health issues are very important. They have a very well-educated workforce and well-educated constituency, and they want to make sure their kids receive a first-class public education. And then they work in one of the more congested areas of the country. I mean, Northern Virginia's traffic is among the worst anywhere. Yes. So we find that that's one of their big issues as well, wanting to make sure that transportation funds and education funds make their way back to Northern Virginia and go to work to improve and improve our roads and sustain our schools.
Tell us a little bit about your formative years. I think you and I discussed earlier the fact that your father worked for Ralph Nader at one point.
Yeah, that's right. My dad was one of the original Nader's Raiders. I came to Virginia when I was 2 weeks old. My dad had just graduated from the University of Texas Law School, and my mother came to join him as soon as the pediatrician said it was safe to take me on an airplane. So at the age of 2 weeks, I wound up in Arlington, Virginia, and my dad went to work in downtown for the Public Interest Research Group with Ralph Nader. So I grew up in a very progressive household. My father was sort of a crusader for justice and consumer rights, and my mother was a school teacher. So I grew up inside the Beltway with that sort of an ethic, that we were there and we'd come to Washington to make a difference and to change the way things were. So I always felt that whatever career I chose, whatever I decided to do, it was important that it be something that made an impact on people's lives. I went to undergraduate, left town a little while to go to undergrad at NYU, where I graduated, and came back and worked for Jim Scott, who was a recently retired member of the House, actually the person whose seat I'm filling here in the House. Went to work for Jim for about 2 years, working in local government, state and local government. And I found that an interesting niche. It was a little different than being in Washington, everybody sort of wants to go to Congress and work on big national issues. But it being almost a native of Virginia, I really enjoyed working on Virginia-specific and local issues. And actually that led me to a job with Kate Hanley, former Secretary of the Commonwealth, but at the time she was chairman of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. So I'm going to talk about very retail politics and retail constituent service. Doing it at the county level, it really was an intensive experience, intensive course in how to deal with constituent service and how to address folks' needs. So I did that for about, excuse me, I did that for about 5 years. And Kate was nice enough to let me develop professionally. I went to law school in the evenings while I worked for Kate. So that's sort of where I got my interest and love for local government and local issues. After I graduated from law school, I joined the Army. I was an Army JAG officer. and served for 3 years in the Washington area, as it turned out. I joined the Army to see the world. I volunteered to go serve in Korea, but the needs of the Army said we need somebody to run a tax center at the Pentagon. So I ended up back in Washington to run a tax center. I ended up doing a lot of criminal work as well while I was there. And then when I entered the private practice of law, I wanted to stay involved locally. And so I served on a number of boards and commissions, appointed boards and commissions to keep my, I guess, keep a finger in the public sector side of things. So that when Jim's seat came open, when we made the decision to retire in March of this year, it seemed natural that I would step forward and try and succeed him here in the House.
Now, you are a practicing attorney, and you also have some real estate interests, so you're probably heavily informed about what's happened in your district and other places in terms of the housing crisis. How, if things improved?
Sure. Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm a real estate settlement attorney now in my private practice. I've got a law firm and a title company. And we started our title company, as I like to tell people, we started a real estate title company in 2008. And I usually will pause for effect and let that sink in. We started a real estate title company in 2008, right at the beginning of the sort of the most severe dip in this housing crisis. So we've seen a lot of recovery lately. Prices are finally, I would say finally back to about peak numbers. I think the statistics would bear me out on that. But it took about 5-6 years now for us to get back to where we were in about 2007. So we sort of finally hit those 2007 levels again. The volume of transactions is not still what it used to be because people need to get back above water and then be there for a while before they feel like they can sell their house and move from house to house. But the economy is definitely recovering. It's been a slow road, but I think we're about there. But doing settlements has been a great training, I guess, for getting into politics because it's another very retail form of retail practice of law. So I get to meet constituents, frankly, coming in and out the door every day, and I look at their address now. I used to look at their address to see where the house was, and now I look at their address to see where they vote. So sometimes it's my first opportunity to welcome a new constituent to the district. Hey, welcome to the 53rd. After we finish your closing, I need to talk to you about something. So, it's been very nice to get out there, and things have the business and the campaign really dovetailed well for me, so that worked out.
To what extent did the crash in the housing market affect the county in terms of the collection of real estate taxes? And did they have to raise property taxes in the county?
Well, so it had a big impact on the values. And so, as you know, most localities, the taxes are a blend. How much your property taxes are, how much property tax revenue is generated, is a blend between the assessed value and the tax rate. So even though the tax rate did go up a couple times, the revenue still stayed down. I mean, you couldn't have raised people's rates enough to make up for the loss in value that you saw in Fairfax and the Falls Church area in particular. So the localities have been going through a tough time financially, and the state was able to manage its budget also, although it was also going through a tough time. But sometimes that was by reducing payments to the counties. So the counties were in a real squeeze and have been for a number of years because you've got less revenue from the state, less revenue coming in from other sources, greater demand on services. I served on the Advisory Social Services Board in Fairfax in 2008, 2009, 2010. When, as revenue was decreasing, we saw our lines at our employment service centers, at our self-sufficient, what we call self-sufficiency centers, but places where people would apply for temporary assistance to needy families and food benefits and things like that. We saw the intake just go through the roof. At the same time, the revenue was going away. So it's been a tough situation, but we've got a lot of really competent folks and really professional employees that have managed to sort of keep us above water there.
I want to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the legislation you're pursuing this session. You mentioned something that the city of Fairfax had you propose, but I know there's a matter that has garnered at least some media attention. Why don't you talk to us about those initiatives?
Sure. Yeah. The Falls Church City Council Charter Amendment was great, very easy bill to deal with, and it's very low key. But the bill that's getting more attention is my House Bill 49. Which makes it illegal to disseminate pictures of another without their permission that are sexually explicit. So I guess in easier, simpler terms, this has been called the revenge pornography bill, or revenge porn. And it's gotten a lot of media attention. It got the editorial board of the Washington Post weighed in on it recently. But what it does is it says that, hey, if somebody exchanges photos of an intimate nature in the context of a relationship, so somebody's in a long-distance relationship, maybe one partner's overseas, and they exchange photos of themselves that they don't expect to be seen by anyone other than the recipient. This is, again, in the context of an intimate relationship. And then when that relationship ends, one of the partners doesn't like the way that it ended, doesn't maybe like the reason for it, and is angry about it, and they decide to go ahead and post those pictures on the internet for anyone to see, and frequently with links to the partner's social media profile, in some cases to their address, in some cases with their phone number. My bill says if you do that to someone with the intent to cause them substantial emotional distress, that's a crime. That's really a form of online assault. You're doing it, to hurt them, to cause them pain, to cause them difficulties, and there ought to be consequences for that. So my bill would make it a Class 1 misdemeanor to post sexually explicit images that you knew or should have known you didn't have a license to post or publish with the intent to cause that emotional distress. It seems to be getting some momentum. I mean, in addition to getting some attention, in the media, it's gotten some attention to some of my fellow legislators, and I've been trying to work the halls and work the offices about this. And I think that we've got some good support. And we'll probably need to work on some of the language. The legislative process is exactly that. It's a process. And once we work out some of the folks' concerns and some of the language issues, I think we'll come out with a good bill.
Now, what about vote by mail? If my memory serves me correctly, you may have something on that as well.
So we've got a couple things on election process improvement. One of my last sort of civic assignments before I was elected was to serve on the Bipartisan Election Process Improvement Commission in Fairfax County. And we wanted to look at some of the reasons we had such long lines in 2012. And some precincts in Fairfax County, we had people waiting in line to vote until 10 o'clock at night when the polls were supposed to close at 7. And so a lot of innovative ideas got floated there. And one of the things that I'm looking at doing was two bills, a pilot program to allow vote by mail in primary elections, if the locality chooses to do that. And another is a study resolution that will actually just study the potential costs and benefits and legislative hurdles to implementing a vote by mail system. The idea would be that we do absentee voting, and people vote absentee by mail all the time. They ask for an absentee ballot. We send it to them. We've got a process to ensure the integrity of that ballot. They sign it and seal it and sign it inside of another envelope. Why not expand that process, not just to absentee voters, but to anybody and to everybody? We found that system works well in places like Oregon and California, where some of their local elections, they've gone to all vote-by-mail elections. It tends to increase participation because we made it really easy for folks to participate. And it eliminates some of the problems of in-person voter ID fraud. There's no in-person voter ID fraud because there's nobody voting in person.
What about in the area of equality?
So I've got some bills. I have what I call my equality or my human rights agenda. And really it's about LGBT equality or gay rights. And so I've got two bills in on that specific topic. One is to expand the Fair Housing Statute to include sexual orientation as a protected class. Right now, you can't be denied a housing opportunity, and as a seller of real estate, you can't express a preference for someone based on their race, religion, national origin, handicap, their elderliness. So there's a number of protected classes, and my bill would add sexual orientation as one of those classes, so that somebody would know that if they didn't get a house, it's because they couldn't afford it, not because of who they were or what their lifestyle was or who they were living with. I've also got a bill to add to expand the Virginia Human Rights statute, so it would bar employment discrimination based on sexual orientation as well.
I noticed on your website you have a New Year's resolution that says, I will work to protect the vulnerable. And of course, Medicaid expansion is intended to do that in terms of health care. Talk to us about that issue and where it is. Sure.
Well, so Medicaid expansion has been an interesting issue. There's an opportunity to draw down some federal funds that would ensure over 400,000 Virginians that are sort of in this donut hole right now where they make too much money to take traditional Medicaid, but not enough money to qualify for subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, and so they can't afford insurance, and they're not poor enough to get Medicaid. So what do we do with them? And so Medicaid expansion provides funds to states to find a way to fill that gap. Medicaid expansion is what we call it, because that's one way to fill the gap, is to simply expand the existing Medicaid program. Right now, the House of Delegates and the Speaker of the House has come out very strongly opposed to expanding Medicaid as it currently exists in its current form because of some of his concerns with the way the Medicaid program is administered, and also because of concerns about our ability to rely on those funds coming from the federal government in perpetuity. The folks in the Senate and the governor have made this the governor in particular has made this a centerpiece of his election and made it a very, very high priority for this session. So we're working every day. We, on our side of the aisle, are trying to give a floor speech a day or every other day on some of the benefits of increasing funds and protecting folks that need health insurance, on explaining to the other side the cost of not doing it. Which means that folks have to go to the emergency room as their primary care provider, which is the least efficient, most expensive way to obtain health care. And we're working with industry and hospitals and the doctors, the Medical Society of Virginia, and all the interest groups on seeing if there's a way to tailor this expansion without expanding Medicaid as it currently exists. Is there a third sort of a way? Some folks are calling it a private option. Is there a way we can do it without simply expanding Medicaid, but can we use these funds in a way that the federal law allows to provide the coverage, maybe through private insurance providers, maybe through other means? But I think we're all about the same goal, which is to make sure we get our federal tax dollars back and apply that towards these folks, towards these, getting insurance for folks, and more importantly, making sure that all Virginians, have access to safe and affordable health care.
We've got about a minute left. I want to give you an opportunity to comment on ethics reform. It's in the news today, obviously.
Well, I've got a bill at 4:30 this afternoon, which would make it a crime to spend your campaign finances on personal items. I found on the campaign trail people were shocked that this wasn't already the law. Virginia has sort of relied on the Virginia way, the integrity of its public officials for a long time. Unfortunately, recently we've been disappointed by some of those public officials, and it looks like we need to sort of codify the Virginia way and put it down in writing, and let's lay a clear marker down on what ethical behavior is and what's not.
Well, good luck with that endeavor. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks, Woody. I really appreciate you having me.
Delegate Simon, good to see you, sir. Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I am Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.